Do you know what the worst part of every new product build is? It's not paying for it. Oh fuck. It's not finding parts for obscure vehicles that nobody carries anymore. I guess braking's not that important anyway. I could always just downshift? Nope, the worst part is the sanding. I really hate sanding. Anakin and I have that in common. I've done a few of the body panels now, but it was just taking too long and I wanted to have the truck stripped and sealed before the winter so that I could save as much of the body as I can. So I decided to have the truck vapor blasted, and that's what I'm going to show you in this video. This is what my truck looked like before the vapor blasting. There's obviously a few wires and odds and ends here that need to go before any real sandblasting can be done, but you get the idea. Some of this paint actually looks like old house paint that someone must have just rolled on there at some point, but the original paint that's been on there for the last, 60 years or so just really does not want to come off without a fight. And that's to say nothing of all the rest that's underneath it that I would also have to sand back if I was going to get a good paintable finish on my own. So for a few $100, I am more than glad to pay somebody else just to come do this for me. And this is where I would put the footage of me meeting Daryl from Legacy Wet Abrasive Blasting here in St. John, if I hadn't recorded it on a removable SD card, which I promptly lost after filming. Sorry, Daryl. In this video, we're reminded that bad things happen in threes. Keep that in mind as you watch. This is bad thing number 1. So I may have lost the intro and some of the beginning footage, but luckily I have more than one camera. This shot already shows the difference between the gray blasted metal on the left and the unblasted painted metal on the right. You can also see a giant dent in the middle of the roof that I'll have to fix at some point before I put on a final layer of paint down the road. So if you don't know what vapor blasting is, it's more or less just sandblasting, but instead of using air to move the sand particles, you use water. It's easier on your workpiece, it leaves much of the less behind, and it keeps it a lot cooler. It has also only cost me about 500 Canadian loonies to have it done, which is, like 89 cents American with the current exchange rate. And once they were finished, this is what I was left with. Honestly, the truck looks fantastic. There's not a hint of rust anywhere, and I actually really like the silver look of the bare metal, so much that for a moment, I almost considered keeping it. I may even incorporate this into a future project sometime down the road. Here's just a quick before and after side-by-side comparison. It's easy to forget just how much old paint and rust these guys took off the truck in just a couple of hours. Unfortunately, stripping rust and paint doesn't just reveal a nice shiny metal underneath, sometimes it also reveals areas that were only holding on due to rust. This spot here is the passenger side of the cab near where the fender's attached. This here is the driver's side of the cab. You can see a sort of line of rust damage, and that's where the fender used to rust against the side of the cab, retaining water and causing it to rot out. But this is the worst of it. I expected some damage along the rear of the cab, but this was even more than I thought. Most of these bottom few inches will need to be replaced along the entire length of the cab. I haven't figured out how I'm going to do that with these body lines in the way yet, but I'll sort that out sometime down the road. What I didn't count on, though, was bad thing number 2, the rain. I should have known. See, when vapor blasting is done, the truck is covered in an anti-rust compound, which protects it for a few days against rusting, so long as it doesn't, rain, so that you have time to prep and paint the surfaces. If you don't get the truck sealed with a decent metal primer in this time, the truck will rust over and you'll need to have it stripped again. Not that my truck would survive a second blasting anyway. Unfortunately, the weather changed the morning after the truck was stripped, and now it's forecasted to rain. If it rains on that exposed metal before I can paint it, I may as well kiss the cab, and all the work I've done to the project so far. Goodbye. Now, I don't have time to remove all the sand manually before I paint, so I decided to use the pressure washer. I know it might sound contradictory to try and clean the truck off with a pressure washer, which uses water so that it won't be exposed to the water from the rain and rust over, but hear me out. If it rains, my truck will be wet for at least a full day, during which time it will rust to bits and this project will come to a crashing end. But if I pressure wash it, it should only be wet for 20 minutes or so before I can have it dried off with towels. Better for 20 minutes of exposure than 24 hours. So after pressure washing and a bit of drying, this is the result. Actually, these are really just the worst spots, and I'm not sure why the areas near the top of the cab took on a little more rust than the rest of the truck, but whatever. Even though I knew this was just minor flash rusting, I was still absolutely panicking internally. So I panic sanded. I'm not sure if panic sanding is a term or not, but it is now. I was not going to watch my $500 and my cab go down the drain. Luckily, it pretty much just wiped off with a sander. To be honest, most of it I could wipe off with a rag. And then I just moved on to the rest of my prep. After I got this area sanded down, I applied a bit of acetone on a rag to clean the surface. I mean, it's pretty clean anyways, but a little bit of dirt did come up on the rag. And now comes the part where I hook up my compressor, take out my Princess Auto spray gun, and give the truck a beautiful coat of primer sealer. At least that's what was supposed to happen, until I realized the guy at the part shop had sold me a urethane primer instead of an epoxy primer sealer. See, told you bad things happen in threes. An epoxy primer like the one I had ordered would have sealed and protected the bare metal beneath it, but the urethane primer he gave me both won't adhere to or protect bare metal. If I had applied that primer and left it for the winter, my cab would have been ruined come spring. My camera was so upset by this that it leapt off its stand. Truly, these are trying times. So I did what had to be done. I bought every bottle of the self-etching metal primer in my little city, and then spray painted my truck. Believe me, I am every bit as disgusted by this spray bomb as you are, but because I couldn't get the primer paint I needed for another few days, this was my only option to keep it from totally rusting over in the rain. So I repeated this process for each of the paintable surfaces on the truck. First sanding, then acetone wash, and then spray paint. My GoPro doesn't do a very good job at picking up colors, but the paint is a much darker gray-green color than it looks here. It also isn't nearly as tiger stripe looking in real life. But that doesn't matter anyway, since this paint is just a stopgap until my real primer can come in. So how did our quick and dirty spray bomb hold up in the rain? Not bad, to be honest. There are a few areas where I didn't cover well enough that got some flash rusting, but overall it's crisis averted. At this point in time, my epoxy paint had arrived and the truck is just about ready to get its first real coat of primer. I even managed to get a little bit of paint inside of the cab as well, but I left the areas that were not stripped covered in sand just as a reminder to myself for later. I mean, look at that sand. This is how a lot of the truck looked before I wiped it off with a pressure washer. It's now been over 2 months since I had the truck vapor blasted and it's holding up really well. As soon as my epoxy primer came in, I rushed out and did 2 coats over 2 days, and I think I got to it in time. I wish I had the time to film that, but I was more worried about getting it done before the second rainstorm rolled in. You can also see that I had most of the body panels stripped and painted as well. They were a little bit of an afterthought for me, but I figured that I may as well have them done at the same time. That way everything has a uniform finish for when I try and paint it and ruin it next year. And this brings the truck to where it is today. This photo was taken just this morning. Unfortunately, this area will soon be covered in snow, making the truck body and frame pretty inaccessible until it melts in the spring. Until then, I plan on getting my drivetrain ready to drop in, some more work down the body panels, and get the brakes ordered for next year. Mostly though, I'll spend the winter working on other projects featured on the channel, like outboards, motors, and whatever other old junk I can lug home. If that's your kind of thing, or if you would like to see how work progresses on the International, then feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.